You're listening to Just a Dude podcast with your host, Nathan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's roll. Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, where we dive into real stories, raw experiences, and the kind of conversations that make you think, laugh, or maybe even cry a little. I'm your host, Nathan, just a dude trying to figure it all out, and today I'm stoked to have an incredible guest with us, Marie Slider Henriksen. Marie's been through more than most could imagine: foster care, military service, addiction, PTSD, and a whole lot of healing. She's a poet, a writer, a photographer, and a fierce advocate for veteran suicide prevention. Buckle up, folks. Marie's story is heavy, inspiring, and as real as it gets. Let's dive in. Marie, welcome to the show. How are you holding up today?
I'm doing okay. I didn't sleep very well, but, overall, I'm okay.
That's the story
That's
of my
about
life. I'm
normal.
like, every day it's a struggle to sleep for me. But Marie, let's start at the beginning because you have a super awesome and wild journey. Childhood and foster care. You joined the Army. You're now writing poetry and talking about healing. Walk us through what it's like for you, or just give us kind of like the 1,000-foot overview of who Marie is and what got you to this point.
Okay. Yes. I blah. Okay.
That's all
Sorry.
right.
So I was born to addict alcoholic parents, and I wound up in foster care with my brother after a couple years of an interesting, beginning. My biological father had joined the military and ended up getting out, and then we went to live with biological mother. She was in a relationship that wasn't very good. She dropped us off with our grandparents. Biological father was a trucker and kind of wasn't around very much. So we were with my grandparents, but at some point the state got involved and said, "Hey, this isn't a healthy situation," and they put us in foster care. When we went into foster care, we were very malnourished when we came in. I had the little pot belly and I used to hoard food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting. When we were in foster care for about 6 years, and in that foster care, we dealt with, different kinds of, experiences. We were mostly with one family, but during the summers, we would go with another family or we'd go to a camp. At some point, we lived with my biological aunt for a year and ended up coming back into the family. The family that I was with for the most part are the ones that ended up adopting us after about 6 years. There was a lot of emotional turmoil in there, kind of not knowing where I belonged.
Mhm.
There was a lot of good in the home, but there was a lot of turmoil as well because we had multiple foster kids there. And so there's a lot of unhealed trauma, a lot of things that weren't talked about, some things that were going on underneath the surface that never came to light for a very long time.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's gotta shape you, like, as a kid. Do you feel like I mean, obviously, did you feel like that made you kinda grow up fast, having been in that foster situation and having all the foster kids coming in and out? Did that cause, did you feel like you had to grow up faster than the average kid, I guess?
Yes and no. I guess in some aspects I did, but for the most part, I kind of got lost in my victim mentality and in my childhood. My emotional health got stunted for a very long time, which led into my addictions because I never fully grew up. I never felt like I could be who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who wanted me because I became this chameleon. I was so
Right.
scared of being left behind, and I didn't know kind of what was going on or where I belonged. And so for a long time, I just kind of hid who I was. So I didn't really grow up. I put on a facade of a specific person, somebody who could handle things a little bit better, but I was this lost child inside, and I became this people pleaser. I became the caretaker, and then I also was very loud and obnoxious trying to be heard,
Yeah.
you know?
It's like, you're speaking about me here. Now, I didn't have the foster care, but I feel like, I was always a people pleaser growing up, and I was loud and, rambunctious sometimes and just wanted to be heard and wanted to be accepted. you know? And
Yes.
it's hard for that when inside you don't feel that way.
Yes. Yeah, and I was also, I had multiple brothers around my age, foster care and adopted, and I would become the brunt of a lot of the jokes, and in school, I got made fun of a lot, but because I was that people pleaser, I just internalized everything. I internalized it, and I became the victim inside, and I deserve this, it's my fault. I was so super insecure on the inside, but on the outside, I was this people pleaser, laughing, joking, just, "Oh, I'm just going along well with it," just
Yeah,
to
it's
maintain.
like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing, only instead of becoming violent or mean, right? It's like 2 personalities. You know who you are inside, but on the outside, you put up this tough facade to just say, "No, no, everything's fine," when in reality, you're just pushing all that stuff down and now creating much more emotional stress for yourself later on in life, right, Marie?
Yes, yeah. And this kind of led me to, so I was finally adopted at 9. The state went back to my biological father, said, "Hey," so in Arizona, back then in the 90s, you could not get adopted without permission from the biological family unless it's been 6 months without contact. Every 6 months, the biological grandparents would make contact. And so we couldn't get adopted. And so it took about 6 years. And then finally, the state said, "Hey, this is not okay anymore." They went back
Right.
to the biological father, said, "Hey, are you able to take custody?" He was not, because of choices he was making in his life. So he got his custody taken. Our mothers had already been taken because she hadn't been in contact for a long time. So we were finally able to get adopted. And I'm so very grateful. The family that raised me, yes, we had our issues. Yes, there was a lot of turmoil going on because there were so many, trauma responses going on. But
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for them because they gave me a more stable home, and they brought me up in my religion, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormon. They helped me have faith throughout all of this stuff. So even though I kind of didn't know where I belonged, I still had this faith and this knowledge of a higher power that was watching over me through everything, even though I didn't understand everything.
Yeah, but it was enough to keep you at least somewhat grounded in your faith to
Yes.
know that you had something that you could rely on and that, with that you had a sense of hope.
Yes, and that continued with me throughout all of the rest of my life, which kind of leads me to where I'm at now. But
Yeah.
with that, so I had this cohesive family, even though there was some struggles, it was a good family. They took care of me. They did the best they could. I can see now that a lot of the stuff that we experienced when we were younger were trauma responses, from each
Mhm.
other, from the family, from family of origin, from the siblings, from having so many foster care kids in the home. There was a lot of trauma responses, and there was a lot that people just didn't know either back then.
Well,
And
yeah, for
so
sure.
I can see things from a different perspective now, but I'm so very grateful for the foundation that I was given, because it, like I said, it led me to where I'm at today, which is a lot more stable now. But for a very long time, I put a lot of blame and shame on my family, and there was some unhealthy family dynamics that I didn't quite understand, but I tried to meld into them, and I was also, there was a lot of blame and shame and victim mentality that I had to overcome over the years. But overall, I am grateful because there was a lot of positives that I can see now, but for years I couldn't see
Yeah,
it. I was
and
lost in
right?
it.
Hindsight's always 20/20, right? Because when we're
Yes.
in the moment, especially when emotions are involved, especially if there's emotions, we can't make that logical thinking or figure out that what's happening for us is actually for the better of us instead of just, like you said, especially if we get in that victim mentality, right? Everything that happens is always going to be woe is me. Right. Instead of seeing the
Yes.
bigger picture. And when you're a young child and don't have, the proper upbringing, like you said, where you've got, foster kids coming in and out, bringing their own trauma to the mix, right? Instead, on top of your own, plus having to live with a foster family and knowing that your biological parents are still out there, but, like you said, for lack of a better term, not having anything to do with you. And it's got to lead to a rough, not only as a childhood, you said you were adopted as 9, but your teenage years, I have to imagine, were probably pretty rough for you, weren't they?
Yeah. So after I was adopted at 9, things kind of balanced out a little bit for a couple of years. However, when I ended up hitting puberty, There was a situation that was going on where I was being inappropriately touched by somebody that was close, and I didn't quite know how to handle that. And there was a couple layers of, now that I'm older, there's also issues where when I was younger, I was hoarding food and I was binge eating. When I
Mm,
hit puberty, that was my escape. That was my first addiction, right? And when I hit puberty, I started gaining weight, but I didn't want to gain the weight, so I started purging and got into bulimia. At that
man.
time,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, at that time, while the sexual abuse was going on as well, I started hurting myself. And so I was self harming for a little while. And then I was introduced to alcohol and weed. And that was when kind of as they say in recovery groups, that is when I had arrived, right?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
was that was when I finally did not have to pretend as much anymore because I had a tool that helped me pretend. I could run away. I had a new solution for the problem that I always had because all of the stuff that I had dealt with when I was younger, I just never felt connected. I never felt important. I never felt like I mattered. And so I was running inside myself and into that chameleon, and
Hmm.
then the drugs and alcohol got involved. And so that was when, my grades started plummeting because I just kind of stopped caring. I was hanging
Yeah.
out with partying, people who partied all the time. I was getting myself into a lot of trouble with ditching school and getting high or getting drunk all the time, smoking cigarettes, out my window. And
Yep.
at this time, I've spoken to my parents in the past about this, and they didn't really recognize what was going on. And they also thought that it was other people influence on me. But in reality, I was kind of the bad influence for a while,
Yeah, and I
and
can see it because when you're in a situation like that, right? And with that, and I even had a stint with alcohol myself, sometimes you go from this not feeling, right? Like you really don't feel anything, and then you introduce that alcohol, now you feel something, right? So you're like, okay, great. This is something now I don't have to feel what I normally feel, which is nothing. At least now I feel, drunk or buzzed, whatever it may be, right? And so now you find that as a crutch. And, so you don't really know what's going on, but you're right, you could become a very bad influence on folks. And like you said, you might have inadvertently done that yourself, but it was because you were trying to make yourself feel. And
yes,
that's what I think of is, we do these things and we learn about them afterwards, right? But during the time, we don't realize it. We're always, I've heard, a lot of folks say like alcohol is not your problem. It's the solution to whatever problem you have. And it's not the
yes.
right solution, right?
Yes, and that was completely true for me. Like, it gave me the confidence to make more friends. It gave me the confidence to kind of stand up for myself. I wasn't getting picked on as much. I became more of a chameleon in other aspects, and then in some
Yeah.
aspects, I started just, "I don't care what you have to say," and I just walked away from it,
Yep.
and I
That
it
liquid
helped me.
courage, right?
Yes, yes. It built me like a stone wall to hide behind, and I also started I to get out of the house, right? I started working, and I was working at McDonald's, and some of the people that I worked at McDonald's with, this was back when you could work at 15,
Yep.
like that was fun. And I joined a metal band, and we would be
Nice.
crazy. I played keyboard in a metal band while I was in
Wow.
choir at school, so that was kind of fun. So,
Yeah.
like,
That's actually kind of awesome.
yeah, so I became this person that could, like, meld into many different areas, but like I said, most of my friends were not very healthy. I actually just went through some of my old yearbooks and I was reading through, and like 99% of the comments in there about sex, drugs, or alcohol,
Wow.
and it's like
Yeah.
that was the type of people that I hung out with all the time. So then I was in a pretty bad spot, and my family came up with a way to try to get me out of where I was at. And my brother had moved up to Utah. I was living in Arizona at the time. That Arizona is where I was raised. Born in New York, lived in Pennsylvania for a little bit, lived in California, but raised in Arizona. So my brother had moved to Utah, and his wife called me and said, "Hey, I need some help watching the newborn because your brother's working all the time." And I just took it as an opportunity. Sure, this is kind of something different, something fun,
You're
right?
right.
But I found out later that it was a conspiracy to get me out of where I was at. So I moved up to Utah, but where you go, there you are.
Right.
And so I found the same type of friends, same type of friends. And at one point, I decided to go party with my boss and his friends. So I was 17 at that point, and my boss was 22, and he had some older guys as well. And, not victim shaming, because my actions do not give permission for other people's actions. However, I put myself in a situation where I was drinking and they got me really high while I was drinking, and it led to 3 guys taking my virginity.
Wow.
And for a
So
long
just taking
time,
advantage of you, right?
yes. So for a long time, I blamed myself because, hey, I got drunk and I went and hung out with them. And so I had to realize that my actions do not give others permission. And so there was a lot of trauma therapy that I had to go through to kind of like recognize what was going on. So in my recovery, I take responsibility for my actions that led me to an unsafe place, but it does not excuse what they did, you know?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I mean, we're
Yeah.
individuals are still responsible for their actions regardless of what anybody else does.
Yes, and I share this just so people know just how lost in my addictions I had gotten even at 17, you
Yeah,
know? And after that happened, I had, like, no hope. I kind of, like, lost who I was, and but at the same time, I had this and like I said, I was going through old stuff yesterday, my old yearbooks, and it was interesting because I really got split into 2 at this point because there was the me that I have no hope, I'm stuck in the drugs and alcohol, just got raped, I've got no worth. However, when I had moved up to Utah, I continued going to, what's called seminary, for my church. It's an hour a day at school, where it's church stuff, to continue learning and growing. And I was doing that and I was surrounded by so many people of faith. And they were building me up and helping me grow and helping me love. And like you read the yearbook from them, all of their comments, and it's just so uplifting and loving. And so I kind of was just split in two where, hopeless and then full of love and hope and faith. And I ended up being able to go to my church's general conference and being able to be in the room with the prophet, and I just felt love and connection. And so I was just so confused because it's like, okay, here is this
absolutely. Yeah,
faith of this loving God and this wonderful connection to a higher power. And then here is this pain. And I did not know what to do with it. And so as I am kind of like figuring this stuff out, I barely graduated high school. I had to take 10 regular classes and 6 internet classes just to graduate and a couple after school credits at an elementary school being a teacher's aide. And I was like fighting hard and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm not going to get into college. I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to get away from home because I need something different. I'm just not in a good place. And so my dad and I got in a conversation, and my dad had been in the Navy. And he made the comment, he's like, "Well, why don't you join the Navy or something?" And we'd gotten in a fight because I wanted to move out, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And
right.
so I was like, "Fine, I'll join the army." And so I did, so I went from being this kind of like traumatized teenager who never dealt with and well, I had been in therapy since I was a child because it's required when you
Right.
are in
From,
foster
being
care.
a foster care, yep.
But I became very good at selective honesty, where I talk about this, so you don't ask me about this. And so, yeah. And so I had never really processed through most of my stuff. And so I went from being this traumatized teenager that never really grew up, that's also fighting with keeping faith and just lost and not sure what to do. And so then I joined the military.
Yeah, what was it for you? What was it that, at that time that you saw that what the Army felt like a way out for you? Was it just because you're totally changing your perspective and moving to a whole new area of the country, starting over essentially? Is that what you felt?
Yes and no. It was also I just needed something for me. I didn't
Mhm.
know who I was. I was that chameleon and I was being something for everybody else. I didn't feel like my body was mine from the sexual abuse and the rape. My body wasn't mine. I didn't feel like my mind was mine because even as a small child, I was diagnosed with ADHD and had been put on stimulants, so I
Mhm.
couldn't really be me. So I didn't know who my mind was. Spiritually, I didn't know who I was because if God loves me so much, why did all this stuff happen?
Right,
And there
that
was a
doubt
lot of
comes in, yep.
confusion. Yeah. And I just didn't know who I was or what I wanted. And so I was like, I need something just for me. And that was what the military was. It was something that was just for me. I could escape all of my past emotions. I could escape the family dynamics that I didn't quite understand. And I went to go stand on my own 2 feet. And it was running away as well. So
Yeah.
it was,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yep. But now for you, though, when you went into the Army, did it give you what you were looking for at first? Did you feel like you had, gotten some of that hope back or gotten some direction for your life?
Yes and no, because yet again, where you go, there you are. I had never processed through my stuff. And so promiscuity became like a huge thing. And then sneaking alcohol, and stuff like that. And I ended up getting stationed. So training was great. Training
Mhm.
helped
Yeah.
me learn responsibility. It helped me grow up. It helped me feel like I mattered, like I was important. It helped me feel strong and powerful. And so, yes, it was good because I felt like I got my own stuff. I became my own person and I was doing something important. Then I got stationed in Germany. And when you are 19 in Germany, you're legally allowed to drink at 16.
Yeah, so
And
that did not help your situation, did it?
yes. Yeah. And to top it off, it wasn't really a military experience in Germany. I was working at a health clinic. And so it was a civilian job in a military uniform. You know,
Gotcha.
yeah, it was not as much training as basic and AIT was. It was I go to my formation, I do workouts, and then I go work, and then I get off in the evening and I could do whatever I wanted. And then I had like 4-day weekends and all sorts of stuff. So I partied all the time. I was drinking all the time. But back
Yeah, idle
then
hands
was
are the devil's playground, right?
yes. So, like, back then, it was fun, and
Right.
when I say fun, it was at the end of the night, I would be crying on the ground because I didn't wanna go home. Back when it was fun, I would drink, 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 get full, wait for the alcohol to hit me, throw up so I could drink more because I could not get enough. That was what it was fun.
Wow,
I was
yeah.
I was I was out there flashing all of Germany. I was partying it up and acting crazy, and that was when it was fun. I didn't see the blooming alcoholism that was inside of me. And I ended up marrying the first soldier that said he loved me. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is great." And it was only because we were being physical and we didn't want to be done and he was getting ready to go back to the stateside and we're like, "Oh, let's get married."
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So shortly after that, he left, and then I had found out that he was living his own life, and I did not know how to handle that. And so, in recovery groups, they talk about there is at some point you become a pickle. Okay? So if you drink and drink and drink, or if you are a cucumber and you put yourself in the brine for too long, at any point you can take yourself out and be a cucumber, right? I
Mhm.
could have stopped drinking at any point and not made that switch. But in Germany, when I was going through my divorce, is when I went over the line, and instead of being a cucumber, I became a pickle. And once you become a pickle or an alcoholic, you can't turn back. Like, you will
Right.
always be an alcoholic. You cannot go back. A pickle cannot turn back into a cucumber. And I can pinpoint exactly when that happened. And that was when I was going through my divorce. It went from drinking to as a tool to help me survive, to I can't live without drinking now.
Yeah.
And yeah. And
It really
so
took you to that next level to where the alcoholism really hit home, and now you're just and I don't wanna say, like, but, like, blackout probably getting blackout drunk, right? And, you know
I never blacked out. I was a
never?
brownout. I was a
Oh,
brownout.
wow.
So
Yeah,
I would lose moments, but I never actually
but not the
blacked
whole
out.
thing. Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's still scary though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But it became where it was, like, almost nearly every day, and I started getting in trouble with my with the military because I would show up to formation drunk, or I wouldn't show up at all. And so
Yeah.
then they put me in a program for a month, and all the program was an hour a day class, and then that's it. And so I just got better at hiding it because, like,
Right.
even my higher ups were at the bar with me that night, and they didn't care
Yeah.
because I was hiding my alcohol and I was drinking clear stuff instead, so it just looked like
Right.
I was drinking water, you know? And so it was really interesting. But and a few years back, I spent time with a friend of mine who I was stationed with out there, and she told me that I am a completely different person than I was back then. She said I was so bad at one point that we had gone on vacation to Prague, and she had to tell me if I pick up a drink while I'm there that they would leave me.
Oh,
I didn't
wow. Yeah.
realize that I was that bad, but I was
Yeah.
just such I had, like, different personalities when I would drink. There was the victim mentality, and then there was, like, the aggressive mentality, and it was just I just wasn't me. I was super emotional and super manipulative, and it just wasn't good. And so I had the 2 layers there, yet again, where I had this alcohol stuff, but I was also I did a good job at what I did,
Mhm.
like, I
You
was
were
a
a
good medic.
functional alcoholic, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
highly functioning alcoholic. We see it all the time, right? I mean, it's a common thing, and I know, we don't talk about addiction or alcoholism a lot is in this country because it's almost got like a negative stigma to it, but I don't know why it's so negative when so many people are affected by it. And it's like we should talk about it more because we need help, especially folks that have an addiction problem, have, alcoholism, whatever it may be. We can't do it on our own. Some people can try, but eventually they'll fail.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
But now when you were in the military, did I read right that you were in Iraq? Is that correct? Did you end up going there? How did that
Yes.
affect your situation in drinking? Did you, were you not able to drink that time or did you find ways to get it in? Because I know Iraq's essentially a dry country, right? And we're not supposed to have alcohol there. So what was that like?
So after I had gotten through my divorce and I was dealing with the alcoholism, still working but doing good, I ended up having getting sent over to Washington State. And in Washington State, my job went from, like a cush civilian job in a military uniform
Mhm.
to you are now a combat medic and we're getting ready to go to Iraq. And so everything kind of changed. The whole
Yeah.
mentality had to change. But I was still drinking and stuff like that. And so we did all this training. We actually did like live tissue training on goats to learn how to
Yeah.
be able to deal with blood and stuff like that. And so then we ended up going to Iraq. Now, in Iraq, I was a combat medic. And so I kind of ended up being like a cleanup, and so I would go on missions sometimes. So my deployment was really split into 3. So the first 4 months, I kind of worked at the aid station. I went on some missions. I was an ambulance driver on base. I would do like 24-hour shifts as the ambulance
Mhm.
driver. And I dealt with my first couple dead bodies, and it was really rough because they would bring people to us at the aid station. We would help them out there, and then we would transfer them to the helipad so that they can
Right.
get sent out. And so my first couple deaths were really, really rough because it was actually, a big vehicle called a Striker, which is like a tank on wheels, and it ended up going over a bridge, and there was multiple casualties and 2 I killed in action, dead on impact,
Mhm.
stuff like that. They brought them to us, and I had to kind of clean up underneath one of them because the bag had opened up, and that was really extremely rough because there was a lot of damage there,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that yeah. And so then my job was to take them to the helipad, and then we would have a ceremony for those that died, or, we would just see off the ones who were injured.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know how to handle all of that stuff. And so, yeah, like there were people that had ways of getting alcohol in.
I figured
And
if
so,
there's a way,
yeah,
soldiers will figure it out, right?
yeah. So the first 4 months was kind of that. It wasn't as much of the alcohol, but then I switched over for the second 4 months. So this is the second section where I was working with the field artillery guys. And it was me and another medic living with a whole bunch of men, and
Mhm.
we went on missions. I was the medic in the truck, and I went on missions almost every day for like 4 months. And we had people that would sneak in alcohol. We would go off base, drop off our interpreter. He would go get stuff, then we would pick him up afterwards, and then, we would end up doing that.
Yeah.
But there was one point where we were all really hungover one day, and there was a huge mishap, and, like, everyone was messing around with each other. Somebody got hurt. Instead of bringing them to the hospital, I decided to try and fix the guy up, and I did it incorrectly. I was still hungover, he got infected. It actually what had happened was he got cut and it clipped one of his tendons in the back of his knees, and
Wow. Yeah.
he ended up having to get multiple surgeries, and like I said, there was a huge infection. He got medically discharged. There was a huge investigation, but we were good at lying, and so nobody got in trouble for it, but he got
Yeah.
medically discharged. Yeah. But there
Which
was
I'm
a
sure
lot
he
of
probably
guilt.
did. He probably wasn't looking forward to, right?
Well, actually,
Or maybe he was.
that was actually one of the weirdest amends. I went and made an amends to him a few years back, and he actually thanked me because he was going to get out in an other than honorable discharge, and that gave him an honorable discharge.
Yeah, because
So,
now it's
it's
a medical,
weird.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so
anyways,
you actually
so
your mistake actually ended up helping somebody out, but you did learn from it, right?
yes, yeah. But yeah, so I was really kind of lost. So anyways, during those 4 months, I was going on missions all the time. I wasn't being the smartest, but I was a hard worker. And it got to the point where after I had been in Iraq for 8 months, I went home on leave. Now, kind of backing up, when I started basic training, I started having issues with my hips that I didn't realize why. I didn't know what was going on. I just thought it was from, working out and whatnot. After those 8 months in Iraq, I went home on leave. And when my body finally relaxed, I couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
My hips had given out. I had really bad bursitis and tendonitis from all of the weight I had on my body with all of my gear, driving
Mhm.
in the trucks, wearing my aid bag, running around, doing all that stuff, and my body just couldn't handle it. So that was the beginning of a medical discharge. I went back to Iraq for another 4 months, but I was doing physical therapy every week, and I was grounded to the fob, and I was only able to work at the aid station and be the ambulance driver.
Right.
So then when
Yeah,
we
because they
got
couldn't
back.
risk putting you out in the field again, right? Because if something were to
Yes.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
when we got back from the deployment, the next year and a half was me lost in my alcoholism because they're telling me, "Hey, your body is falling apart and we can't have you in here anymore." So they medically discharged me. So the next year and a half was me getting medically discharged. And also I was helping get ready my battle buddies to go deploy again. And so I felt a lot of guilt and shame that I couldn't go with them to deploy. I wasn't able to work out the way that I was, and I got lost in my alcoholism yet again. At some point, I had stopped drinking for like a year, but my food addiction got out of hand. I stopped drinking not because I thought I was an alcoholic. I just like, hey, I'm not okay. I need to kind of like take a break from this for a little bit. I didn't think that I had an alcohol problem. I was just like, oh, maybe I should take a break.
Yeah,
Alcoholics, right? Don't know.
exactly.
So I ended up quitting while I was getting medically discharged. I quit the drinking, but my alcoholic tendencies were still there, and I just turned it into food addiction. So I'm like gaining weight and not doing good. And after a year, I just start drinking like nothing happened again.
Yeah. Like,
And
just
that
picked up
should have
right
been a
where you left
sign.
off, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So then I got medically discharged, and I'm grateful that I got my medical discharge because with that medical discharge, it set me up for the rest of my life because I had disability. I was already connected to the VA and all of that stuff. Yeah. And so that was wonderful. And then when I got out, it was a very hard transition for me mentally and emotionally because I was that blooming alcoholic. They gave me a ton of money to get out and I
Right?
blew it. I blew it. It was 30 grand and I blew it in 2 months. I went to
Wow.
Vegas, I was drinking all the time, I was in victim mentality, I was eating out all the time, and then I was just broke and I didn't know what to do. I had my disability and a little bit of a paycheck, but I didn't know what I was gonna do, so I was like, "I'm gonna go to school." So, as I am, like, going to school and when I also start a relationship with a man, and it was very, very much a codependent alcoholic relationship because he was military as well. I had known him, we had
Mhm.
deployed together. He never really dealt with his stuff. I never really dealt with my stuff. I'm a bloomin' alcoholic. He's dealing with his own stuff, and I am just in trauma response after trauma response and taking a lot of things out on him and not knowing how to take responsibility for myself, putting a lot of blame on him, you know, and there was just a whole lot. I was going to school because I was like, I need to do something. And I graduated from a community school with an AA and a certificate, AA in general education. And I started going to school for applied mathematics. I was going for a bachelor's in applied mathematics with the hopes of getting a PhD. And I ended up getting in an accident with my ex's kids, and it kind of like led into a whole lot of different things. The kids were okay, but it was a really bad accident. And I kind of that weekend lost myself. And instead of staying there and helping him with his traumatized kids, I left to go to a friend's wake who had passed away, and just as an excuse to go get drunk for the weekend.
Yeah, you just let it yeah, you just wanted to make sure that you could again, right, running away, like when we went to the army
Yes.
and things like that. I see the pattern continuing. So at what
Yes.
point for you, Marie, did you, did it click for you to say, "All right, I've gotta do something. I have to do something different," right? Because if you woulda kept going down that path, you may not even be here right now.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that ended up happening. So that weekend was the blow up with my ex. We ended up splitting up. I had been having a feeling that I needed to move to Florida for a couple of years, but I chose the relationship instead of going. And so
Mhm.
when this all happened, I was just like, okay, I feel like I need to go to Florida. I know it was God, but I did it the wrong way. You know, I took financial aid, I dropped out of school, and I just left. And I kind of lost myself for a while. And so over that next 2 years or year and a half, it was over the next year and a half is when I really like hit my bottom. I got to a point where I was in Florida at a place, I walked away from family and friends and everybody, and I jumped into a life of partying with college kids. And I didn't
Yeah.
even start school. Like, I was going to, but I decided not to, and I started working at a brew house, and I was partying with all these college kids, and I, at one point, was living with a bunch of college kids, and I'm like, "Something is not right here, like, I need to leave." Like, these are underage college kids that I am getting drunk all the time, and I'm, like, 28 at this point, and I'm like, I'm not
Yeah, so
even in
you're like, "Wait a
school.
second, what am I doing?"
Yeah. So I finally get my own apartment. That was when I started realizing that other people weren't my problem, I was. That was when I started realizing that I was drinking all the time by myself. I was going to the bar by myself. I was just miserable. All of the things that I said I would never do with my drinking, I was doing it. "Oh, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna drink this much.
And
I'm
you
not
didn't
gonna
even
drink
realize it,
how."
right? Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, and it's just like these
Until I
things you
was
say yeah. Yep.
until I was finally by myself. I wasn't living with anybody. I wasn't in school, and it was literally I realized that I was my own worst enemy. And I realized I could not be alone in my own brain. And there was a lot of different situations that happened that made me realize that my perspective of my childhood was so wrong. And there was just so many things that were going on. And I met a woman who she worked in the psych unit, and she really helped me realize, like, hey, you're kind of bordering on alcoholism. When I showed up to her house after drinking 8 beers, and she's like,
Mhm.
"Why are you driving right now?" You know?
Right. You're
And I
like,
was
"Wait a
like,
second,
"Oh,
this is
no,
how I
dude."
drive normally." Yeah, right?
Exactly. I'm like,
You
"I'm
you're like,
totally
"I can't
fine,
drive
dude."
unless I've had at least 8."
Yes. And so then I was like, "No, no, I am an alcoholic." And I'm like, "Oh, crap, I am an alcoholic." So anyways, it led to I was driving with a friend drunk at one point, and I was swerving so bad. I almost hit the guardrail. I was in the fast lane. I almost hit the guardrail. I overcorrected, and as I overcorrected, I literally felt God grab the wheel and straighten it as somebody went zooming. Like, I was going 70, somebody was going 80 or 90 past me. My friends would have been dead. I would have been dead, like, it would have been a horrid accident, but literally I felt God straighten it, and he's like, "You need to straighten up. You are not doing okay. You're gonna kill somebody that you care about at some point." And that was when I found out about recovery, and I walked into the rooms of recovery, and it completely changed my life. Now, when I first got sober, it was would go to work, I would go to meetings, I would go home and cry, and that was my repeated pattern for so long.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
ended
because
up
you had a lot
Go
of I
ahead.
mean, there's a lot of stuff there, right, that you're going through, especially when you're first going into a program and learning about what it is and, because 'cause I've read the AA books and stuff like that and read through those, and there is a lot of steps that you have to take to really get yourself, but it's not, it's not like you can just go through all your steps in 2 seconds and be ready, right? It's a process you have to go through, and it's definitely hard. I mean, because getting sober obviously flipped things for you, right? In a good way, but also it was very hard too, right?
Yes.
So it was this when you were driving down, you felt that wheel, you felt God take that wheel. Was that the turning point moment for you then?
Yes.
Was that the moment where you're just like, oh my goodness, Marie, what are you doing?
Yeah. I was still drunk, but I felt like that sobered me up, and I got my friend home, and that next morning when I left, I was like, "All right," it was that night that I found a meeting.
Yeah.
That was
And
it.
so have you turned back at all? I mean, we all have, I know that the people have, occasionally people will slip, but, I'm just not that, not that I'm going to throw you on the, down
No,
the,
you're
under the
good.
tires or nothing, but no, I'm just wondering. And so have you stayed on the path and worked the programs and stuff since then? Cause it's been what, about 8 years now?
Yeah. So, thank God I only have 1 white chip. In Florida, they called it was a white chip they gave because it was a poker chip because 'cause you're gambling with
Hmm.
your life, right?
Oh yeah.
Here in Utah, they do a 24-hour chip, but thank God I've only had 1 white chip. That does
Yeah.
not mean that I haven't relapsed in other ways, because I have relapsed with my food addiction, I've relapsed with promiscuity, at the beginning, I relapsed into nicotine and codependency and stuff like
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yep.
but
And you know what? To tell you the
alcohol.
same, Marie, like for me, since I quit drinking, a couple of years ago now, it's like I find myself doing the same things. Like you start eating a bunch of crap and you're like, oh, what, here I'm trying to fill a void, right? I'm trying to do the same thing that I used to do with the alcohol, but then you're like, you got to snap yourself out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. Like when I first got sober, uh, like I said, I was in such like a massive depression, and then I started realizing that where I was working was not gonna work. I was working at a brew house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So I ended up quitting that. I also ended up like walking away from friends and family. I started living recovery 24/7. It was I lived in the clubhouses. I would socialize with only people who were sober. I started kind of working those steps, but I couldn't really go through them completely, but I did like portions of them to help me. You know, Around this time is also when I realized how bad my mental health problems were, and then my physical health was getting worse too. And so I tried working at another job, but ended up having to quit that. And I have been on disability ever since. My physical health and my mental health has gone completely downhill. And I have been recently diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that affects everything in my body.
Oh,
I
wow.
I constantly wear braces. I've got braces on my knees when I go out. I've got inserts in my shoes, a brace around my waist. Last year I had my hips replaced, but over these years of my sobriety, I realized that I had been self-medicating from all of this stuff that was going on in my body that I didn't know. My
Yeah.
medical discharge from the army was just another symptom. My hips giving out, that was just another symptom. But I've recently realized that a lot of these symptoms have been present since I was a child that I just didn't know how to handle, and I never felt comfortable in my body. And all of it also affects I've got a hyperactive, I can't think of what it's called. I've got POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which causes an overactive nervous system. And so I have always been stuck in fight or flight. My body has
Yeah,
not felt
literally.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I
My
can't no wonder you were drinking, right? If this is the way that you've
Yes.
felt and all these things now coming out, absolutely. I mean, not saying that as
Yeah.
an excuse, right? But you
Yeah.
can you can obviously see why someone like yourself who's been dealing with all these issues might turn to substances to try to help.
Yes. Well, and then you add on top of that, the way that my brother explains it and my therapists agree, I've had PTSD from the day that I was born. with all of the abuse that was going on in the original home and in the foster care and stuff like that, like I've always had the PTSD. And during my sobriety over these last 8 years, and I don't know how much details you want me to go into, but I'll just kind of give an overview. I have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, with PTSD, anxiety, depression, insomnia. I have sleep apnea. There's so many different things that are going on that's messing with my nervous system and my
Yeah.
emotions. I had to I was at a year and a half sober, was my first trip to the psych unit because I got triggered to the past abuse. I didn't know how to handle it, and I was about to end my life. I was going to put my car in front of a train. And thank God that I was able to have the ability to share with
Yes.
somebody about that. And they said, "Hey, I don't want to bury you, so get your aid to the VA." You know.
Yeah. No,
And so
and
that
thank
was
goodness you did because right now you're almost an advocate, right?
yes.
For folks and telling people that, look, you don't have to deal with this on your own. But do you wanna
Yes.
kind of explain for the listeners out there what you're doing now to kinda help others with, similar situations? Maybe not the same, obviously, we're not all the same, but,
Yeah.
you're a big advocate, especially, I know with veteran suicide prevention and, with the recovery. So, tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that, what you're doing today.
So let me just give a little bit
Sure.
more of an overview of
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
mental health
Yep.
in these 8 years real quick first. So I was in the psych unit that first time in 2018, and then I 2020 hit, and I kind of
Yes.
lost my mind again. But I had done dialectic behavioral therapy twice, which really kind of helped. 2020 happened, and I really kind of fell into my food addiction really badly. 2021, I moved out here to Utah to be close to my family because my dad ended up getting diagnosed with dementia. 2021. Beginning of 2022 is when I really hit my lowest bottom in my sobriety, and I had gotten up to 250 pounds. I was not in a good place. I started trauma therapy finally. Well, I started cognitive processing therapy, and we went
Mhm.
really deep into a lot of my trauma. So, cognitive processing therapy is when you go in and you identify the lies and the stuck points you've been telling yourself, and you start challenging that old programming.
And that's gotta
So,
be tough. I have to
yes.
imagine that's extremely tough.
Yes. So over that next year of 2022, I started losing weight. I was in this trauma therapy. I had been taking medications that weren't working because I was misdiagnosed as bipolar. They found out that I was borderline personality, which means it's not a chemical imbalance. It was a temporary chemical imbalance because of my mental health. And once I started
Gotcha.
once I started processing through everything, the meds started having adverse reactions, so I ended up in the psych unit again. So I get out of the psych unit. They detox me off of all of my medications. In January of 23, I ended up getting a breast reduction to help with my back because my back is just not doing good. Between that surgery and losing the weight, my body didn't know what to do. It didn't know how to balance itself.
I can imagine.
Yes. So my hips started tearing apart and my physical health started getting even worse. So over that next year, or over the next 6 months, in the beginning of 2023, it was preparing. It was kind of detoxing from all of the meds, coming out of that psych unit, healing from one surgery, and then I ended up in a care facility, a veterans home for 8 months while they did bilateral hip replacement
Oh,
surgeries.
man. Yeah.
Okay. So while I am in there, I'm also dealing with some PTSD because I'm around a lot of veterans. There's a lot of different situations that are happening. I'm also in a new relationship at the same time, and I get married in between my surgeries. But around the same time, I'm losing weight, but seeking food as comfort again because I
Mhm.
am like healing. I end up in bulimia again. So, I am stuck with the trauma of my body falling apart, the trauma of being in a new relationship and sobriety, being triggered back to old relationships, and trying to handle life, getting stuck in my bulimia. And so when I got out of the facility, I moved in with my husband. but I end up going to an intensive outpatient program for PTSD and food addiction. And so that was 16 weeks of intensive therapy, kind of working through my PTSD and my food addiction and kind of healing from my surgeries as well, while also recognizing that I've got even more health problems than I realize. There's a lot of other medical stuff, and I won't go into complete details with that, but just every joint in my body is deteriorating. I've got arthritis in multiple joints. I've got internal problems. I have uterine prolapse. There's a lot of other stuff that is going on, and I'm also working through this mental health stuff. So the IOP really saved my life. It helped me to be able to recognize what was going on and give me new tools, because over the years in my sobriety, I've had to learn different tools at different points. So that leads me to the beginning of this year. Okay, so I'm in a much better place now. I just wanted to kind of give a heads up. Here's all of the mental health treatment that I've done. Here's all the physical stuff going on, relational stuff. Leads me to this year, and I feel the calling to publish a book. So during all of this time, as I am in my recovery, I've always written. It's something that has always felt good to me. But in my
Yeah, it's a
sobriety,
good outlet. Yeah.
yes. But in my sobriety, God gave me a new voice to write about recovery from trauma and addictions. And so I mostly do poetry, and usually everything is online. If anybody's interested, I'll give Nathan the links for you to access. All of my poetry is free online, but I was prompted to do a poetry book. And so I started getting this book together. And then my husband and I was finally feeling a lot better. I was still using my braces and cane and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But we went on our honeymoon for a month. When we came back, the book got published. And
Oh,
around
nice.
that time is when I had the feeling that I needed to start podcasting as well. I think the book was more of a push to get myself out of my comfort zone. So I started podcasting, and the first podcast that I am now a regular on, it's called Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran. And
Oh, nice.
so, yeah, so it's another veteran who interviews other veterans to get their story out. And so he interviewed me and we got along so well, he decided to have me back on. So we have done about 13 episodes where
Good.
we've kind of, yeah, so where we've kind of broken up my story and his story and kind of just shared about our stories a little bit more. And with that, we also talk about PTSD. We talk about military transition to civilian life, and we are going to be starting next week interviewing other veterans to kind of
Nice.
talk about a little bit of their story, but also how they are healing out loud and how they are advocating for other people to heal, how they're using creativity to heal and stuff like that. And then also we're going to interview other people who advocate for veterans. And so I
Yeah,
started
good.
doing that. Yes. And then I also have been on a few other podcasts, one for suicide awareness and prevention, one just for mental health, and then now I'm here with you and
Right.
just kind of sharing my story out there. And along with all of this stuff, I am working on continuing to write. I am working on a couple kids books on facing emotions. I'm working on another couple poetry books. I'm working on some essays. I'm working on an autobiography. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. On the other side, there's another layer of what I am doing, and I'm excited to announce this. I've kind of like touched base a little bit, but I am starting to build a community, which is called Slider Babe. And so Slider is my adopted last name, my maiden name, and then I'm the baby of my family. And so it's going to be Slider Babe, and it is a community. So it's healing out loud, creatively healing out loud through community. And
Oh,
so
I
I
love that.
am, yeah. So I'm working on building a community for other people to share how they are being creative, healing out loud, being advocates for other people, and sharing tools to help other people heal as well. And so I'm working on that right now with a business partner, and we're hopefully in the next few months going to be publicly announcing the company and the website. And so my goal is to show people how I am healing out loud, for myself to be a recovery advocate, and also to be able to encourage other people to heal out loud. And then my book that I have written, so it's More Me Than I Used to Be, A Journey to Freedom. So this is the
I
one
love
with
that
my
title, by the way.
poetry.
I love
Thank
that
you.
title. That's a good one.
Thank you. But my hope is to get this book. I want to at some point get enough funds that I can put this book into jails and recovery centers so that people can have it for free. Just so that they know how I have healed out loud, and hopefully be able to encourage them to heal out loud as well.
Yeah, and this is amazing, Marie, because there's so many people in our country and really probably throughout the world, if you think about it, that deal with addiction, deal with PTSD. I mean, look at how many, former soldiers that we have in this country and still active that, and you know as well as I do, the VA does not give you guys enough help to deal with your PTSD. And I come from a point of view where I was a law enforcement officer for 13 years. So I have some of that PTSD as
You
well.
get it. Yes.
I know the transition too. Like it's not the same as but when I left being a police officer and tried to go into the civilian, true civilian world, it was a huge sidestep for me. It was like you said, you had to relearn how to do everything because there's like, just like the military, there's the military way and the civilian way. Well, the same thing with cops. Even though you're still a civilian, it's still a paramilitary organization,
Oh, yeah.
so that there's a
Completely.
lot of structure and things there and it's a life or death situation. Then you come, my biggest thing was when I come into the regular workforce is I had to like rechange my mind to realize that everything I did was not going to affect somebody's life for the negative or the positive. You know what I mean? So I didn't have to make quick decisions. I didn't have to think like, hey, this is, someone could die if I don't make the right decision here, So
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I totally know that. And that's why I wanted to have you on because I'm such an advocate myself for law enforcement, first responders in general, right? Law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, we all see that thing, and our military, because our military does things on a voluntary basis. Think about this. You guys sign up to go to foreign countries to fight so that we can be free here at home. And so my opinion is that we owe our veterans everything and we definitely don't do enough for them. So if I can have folks like you on here that realize that there is that, that piece missing, that's a great thing because hopefully we can get, even if we just reach one person to even just reach out to you and say, hey, Marie, maybe I'm having some issues or, hey, can I, send me the link to your poetry. If we can do that, hopefully we can make someone's life a little bit better and start moving people forward with us.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, so yes, I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for helping veterans, right? I work with veterans in recovery, and like I said, I'm doing this advocacy through the podcast and stuff like that, but also recognizing that everybody has permission to have PTSD, right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people think that it's just has to be military or it has to be law enforcement or whatever.
Yeah.
But like
No, it doesn't have to
the
be. Yep.
goal of what I am doing with the healing out loud and being an advocate for other people to heal out loud is showing that everybody has their own traumas, their own addictions that they need help with, and showing that yes, we can deal with our emotions. We don't have to hide them. You have permission. Like you don't have to have permission, but you do, right? You have
Yeah.
permission. You can be how you are. You can deal with your emotions. And so like when I'm doing my recovery advocacy, it is for everybody. Right. So if people, I am not a professional, and I will say this again and again, I am not a
Right.
professional. So if you're seeking a
Same here,
professional,
right?
don't come to
We're
me.
speaking from personal
Yes.
experience, and we want to share because maybe we can help you by sharing
Yes.
experiences that we've had, but don't take this as medical advice, right? If you want
Yes.
to see a doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, please do so. We encourage it,
Yes.
right? But yes,
Yes.
we're just sharing experiences so that hopefully you can, one, learn from our experiences so maybe you don't make the same mistakes, and two, know that you're not alone.
Yes. And my job is not to tell you how to heal. My job is I'm going to tell you this is how I've healed. I can say, hey, I suggest you try this because you never know what's going to work unless you try it. But I will tell you how I was able to stay sober through some really hard things, to
Yeah.
stay here on this earth through some really hard things. And the biggest thing that I can say, which is why I'm building this community is what saved me. My recovery groups, my church groups, my veteran groups. community is what saved me. And so I want people to know that they are not alone. So I may not be able to fix all your problems, but you could
Right.
reach out to me and I can direct you to a community that
Exactly.
can help you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I think the nice thing too, Marie, is by the time this episode airs, hopefully your website's up and running, and we can
Yeah.
just launch it with this show, because I think it's so great to launch a community where, it's inclusive, anybody could be there and just share experiences. Like you said, heal out loud because essentially, especially with PTSD, we're told all the time the best way to combat PTSD is to talk about it.
Mhm.
So literally healing out loud, like you said.
So I had an experience. I've had a couple of experiences which kind of verify what I'm doing is where God wants me to be, right? I was asked, but it was actually one of my brothers. He's like, like, can't you go like a month without talking about your trauma or your addictions and stuff like that? And I'm like, no, like I heal out loud because I suffered in silence. So I heal out loud to hopefully let other people not suffer in silence, right? And I had this really cool experience to verify why I do it the way I'm doing. Because I've had multiple people ask me, like, hey, why don't you get a degree? Why don't you become a counselor? And I'm like, well, because then I'm focusing on what you have to do. And there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of laws and there's a lot of stuff where I
A
can't
lot of
just be
stuff. Yep.
genuine. And so I had an experience the other day where I went to a recovery club, and I started talking to this one guy, and he's like, I was asking him about himself, right? Just like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" Talking to 2 different guys. And this guy's like, I don't know you. You asked too many questions. And he was very standoffish. And I was like, okay, let me change to be more me. And so then I just started sharing my own stuff, like how I just recorded with wisdom, soul wisdom or Phoenix Wisdom podcast,
Hmm.
right? Where we just did an episode about suicide, veteran suicide awareness and prevention, right? So I just started talking about that and started talking about suicide awareness because I've lost so many people in my sobriety or since I've been deployed at all,
Yeah.
so many people to suicide. And anyways, I started talking about that and this guy, you could literally see him melt. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I was so standoffish. He's like, I've lost so many people to suicide too. Here is what I'm doing to advocate. And it was just this beautiful melting of just one person being there for another person, sharing their journeys. And so it was just a good validation that this is why I talk about my stuff because some people aren't ready to talk about themselves, but
You're
they want
right.
to know what's going on with you. They want to be able to relate to somebody because they don't feel like they relate. And when they go to a therapist, they don't feel like they relate because that therapist just is talking about them. They're not allowed to talk about themselves very much.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
this is why I do this to help people see that, hey, you're not alone. This is my journey. And so it's just a really cool representation of what I am trying to do.
I think it's awesome too by you sharing your story because that also subconsciously gives that other individual the ability or the wherewithal to know that it's okay to talk about your stuff, right? Because you're opening it up. You're saying, hey, listen, I'm going to throw it all out there. This is me. This is what I've done. And it's hopefully breaks down those barriers, especially when, new people go into recovery, right? We're all tight. They're all tight knit and, don't want to say anything, just kind of observing. Oh, I'm just here to listen, right? That's what we get.
Mhm.
And, but you realize that those conversations and talking to those people and sharing your experiences helps to get them out of their own way, essentially, and then
Yeah.
start opening up themselves.
Kid, will you bear with me and
Yeah,
let me read a poem for you?
sure. Absolutely.
So this poem is about writing, but it also can be about me speaking. But writing is where I feel the most comfortable. Like I write my journey for other people. So I this is called Just Right, and it's kind of just a good explanation of why I'm healing out loud. And like writing is how I heal out loud mostly. The podcasting is new. I'm getting
Yeah.
used to it,
But you're doing
public
a great job
speaking,
so far.
but writing is where I feel most comfortable. So I'm going to read this. I wrote this I started writing it years ago, but I finished it in January. And so it'll be kind of perfect because you said we're airing in January. And so this will be a year old at that point. So it's called Just Right. I write because it sets me free. I write so others can see me. When pen hits paper, all is well. It's like I'm under quite a spell. It comes to me in bits and pieces. I find the words in the paper's creases. Sometimes I type them on a screen. The medium doesn't matter to set the scene. Getting the message out of my mind helps to loosen the chains that bind, the ones that try to strangle my voice, telling me I have no choice, that I must keep faith to myself. My word should never leave the shelf. They tell me that my message is false. Sometimes I get sick of dancing this waltz. It's all just lies to crush my spirit, to keep me small. I won't hear it. My voice was given by the one who sent to earth his holy son. When I listen with my heart, the words he slowly does impart. Often I write of fear and pain and show that hope does still remain. Writing gives me joy and peace. It's given me a great release, a place to share the deepest things that bind my mind as if with strings, a place for faith and dreams to bear so others may see and find strength to share their pain and love, faith and fears, to also help others throughout the years. My hope is one day by using my voice, I may help others to have the choice to find their own so they can be free and feel God's love just like me. If I get stuck, the words hard to find, I search the corners of my mind. I find new words that mean the same. Original messages sometimes remain. Many times, however, if my heart is open, God changes things, His message to be spoken. I know I'm not perfect at sharing His light, yet I tell myself often, don't fear, just write. God opens the hearts of those who read. My words are often just a seed, a way for others to see His hand, how He has helped me heal and stand after all my many falls, and show how He broke my many walls, the ones I built to keep others out. Now, as I move forward, I will gladly shout about the hope I get from above and the warmth of heavenly love. One day, God will stop the internal fight. Until then, I'll continue to just write.
I love that. That was amazing, Marie, and it just it shows all of the, the passion within you and the things that you've been through, but how you've leaned into your faith and into your writing to really pour, a message for yourself out there, and it was just absolutely beautiful. I think, even though there's pain and stuff involved in there, you're not letting it get you down. You're going to God, you're going through your recovery, and you found your purpose. I think you've seriously found your purpose in life by, even just if that's all you do is write these poems and let people read them. I think it's going to inspire people to realize that they're not alone. Other people have been through this before, and there is hope. There is hope for a better life after all.
Yes, very much so.
Yep. That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I think the listeners are going to love that, and it's really going to push them, especially anybody looking for recovery. I think it's going to push them right towards your book, and at least to read your poems online. So thank you for sharing that with us. I really do appreciate that, Marie.
Thank
I
you.
want to. We're getting close to the end of our time, but I like to do a little segment just to let the listeners get to know you a little bit. It's called Dude Q&A. I just ask you really fun, dumb questions, and you just answer them
Okay.
quickly without any overthinking. I might, come back at it, but just, so people get to know the real Marie, who you are. So, favorite poem that you've written? Do you have one? And now I know this is probably asking like, who's your favorite child, but do you have a favorite poem?
I do have it. Do you want me to share it with you?
Yeah, you want to share it?
It's called More Me Than I Used to Be.
Yeah,
And it is one of my favorites. It's actually what inspired me for the name of the book, More Me Than
yeah,
I Used to Be. So, the idea is that there was a me that was hidden inside the entire time, that was lost and hidden. And God, like Michelangelo chipping away the stone to find Michael, God has been chipping away to find me.
I
And
love
so
that.
that's this poem. So it's called More Me Than I Used to Be. All of my life, I've collected pieces of varying sizes and shapes. I don't know why I held some close and others I hid behind drapes. Some people offered me distorted pieces, and as a hoarder, I couldn't see that even though they were part of a puzzle, they didn't belong to me. They were part of someone else's picture, usually those who were trying to hand them over to me instead of by their own box abiding. Like them, I too offered pieces to others along my path. And as I'm learning to step back, sometimes I have to laugh. There are some holes inside that make the picture hard to see, and other places I force the shape of a distorted figure of me. I know the image I manipulated is not the one God made, for He created everything beautiful just the way they were laid. At some point, I looked in other boxes, wishing mine was different. So I started mixing up our pieces, creating something magnificent. I started forcing pieces together, throwing others away, stealing some from other people, and my picture changed every day. Where I'm at now is trying to get back to the box that is mine alone. And with the help of other people, God's will is being shown. I'm learning how to pick up pieces, the ones I tried to hide, by giving them to other people or thrown away in pride. I'm letting go of the distorted ones that don't fit anywhere and giving them back to their owners so their box won't be so bare. God painted the picture on my box to be the way He desired, and I'm done trying to change things. It makes me just too tired. Slowly but surely, as I get things in order, I know one day I'll find the picture that God had planned for me that got lost in my mind. Pieces are finally fitting together in the way I know He wants. He's telling me I'll be okay in my heart and in my thoughts. The only thing I know for sure is I'm more me than I used to be. And I know the final piece of art is more perfect than eyes can see.
That was amazing. I can see why that's your favorite. I love it. I could relate to that so much just because, of our talking and, being people pleasers and, back in the past. And it just, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing that too. This
Thank
is
you.
probably gonna be one of the best episodes that I've had.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, let's move on just a little bit, but thank you for that. I wanted to make sure that I told it because that was a great poem. And I'm looking forward to reading all the rest of them now. So for you, are you a coffee or a tea person?
So I used to do coffee, but with my religion, I'm back in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I don't do coffee or caffeinated teas. So I just do herbal teas sometimes.
Gotcha. That's what I drink a lot of, herbal teas. I like to have a nice throat comfort tea before I do a podcast, so
Yeah. My favorite is hot chocolate though.
love it. One song that got you through a tough day.
Sherry Call is an LDS, a Mormon singer, and she's got a song that's called "Flowers for Everyone," or "He Gives Flowers to Everyone," and it's one that I kept me going when I was in Iraq. There's a line in there that says, "And when they're out of season, or there is snow, or when she's in the desert where they hardly ever grow, He gives her diamonds in the midnight sky. Season after season, His love will never die." And so that song what meant so much to me, especially in Iraq. I would go lay out in the motor pool on the ground and just look at the stars and just remember God's love for me. And He
Yeah?
always has something beautiful for me to see.
Yep, absolutely, that's the truth, isn't it? If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
That's a hard one. Any superpower? Probably flying because walking is a lot of pressure on my
Yeah,
joints. And so I
right.
would love just to be able to fly to places. That would be
Yep.
wonderful. And I love traveling, but sitting in the car is painful.
Oh, yeah,
So,
especially with the roads in the US.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. What's one thing you miss about the Army, if anything?
I miss feeling like I go through phases, right? But I when I was in the military, I felt strong and accomplished and like what I did mattered. I felt like it was I loved the camaraderie. But the thing is I would have said before that is what I miss, but I am building that now
Again, yeah,
with
I mean, you're
my
building a
my new
community.
community. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
so I missed that for years. I was isolating, and so that is what I missed the most was that camaraderie and feeling important, and now I'm getting back to that, but
Yeah.
in a way that I am in charge, and I wasn't hiding and melding into something. I am becoming more me and
Yes.
being able to build that camaraderie, which is now more meaningful, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and it's more on I don't wanna say on your terms, but more people are gonna get to know you, the real you this time.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Alright, for you, cats or dogs?
So I used to say dogs, but I just had a cat that I had for 5 years. She was my emotional support animal that really got me through a lot of hard times, especially 2020, but we had to put her down, last year while I was in the care facility. So that was another thing that I had to deal
Jeez.
with in there.
Yeah,
So I would say now,
you
yes,
definitely have the list for things that just like, "Hey, let me throw another
yes.
monkey wrench in there," right?
I call myself just to finish the question, I will say cats because cats, you don't have to go outside and walk, but you can if you want to, and they can just hang out with you. But with the experience, I call myself, and one of the names of one of the books I'm working on is a hoarder of experiences. So
I like
God
that.
wanted me to experience a little bit of a lot of things so I could help more people. And so that's the thing is I've had a little bit of a lot of experiences. I am a hoarder of experiences, good
Yeah.
and bad.
I'm gonna
Oh,
if you don't mind, I'm gonna borrow that from you because I feel like that fits me too, from all the different career places I've been and all the different things I've done in my life. It's like, yeah, I couldn't think of a better way to think of that, as a hoarder of experiences because I've definitely had plenty of those.
so make sure you coin me.
I
That's
will.
no, I'm just
TM,
kidding.
trademarked. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So the last question, this was kind of serious, but if you could tell your teenage self one thing, what would it be?
It gets better.
I like that. It does, right?
It
It
gets
did.
better and you will find yourself. Ooh,
And
sorry.
I know that's a tough one because, you've had all these experiences in your life, right? You hoarded them that we talked about, but you've done all these things and look at where you are now. You've got a husband, you're building this new community, you've written books, you're sharing out loud, you're healing out loud, and it's just absolutely amazing to see everything that you've been through and to share. I definitely want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of these experiences because I know there's people out there. I relate to you so much more than I thought. I knew I was going to relate to you fine, but I think there's so much more in common here that we've had that I love that you shared your story and opened up your vulnerability, right? You're healing out loud to hopefully help someone else out there and to show, even though you got a little emotional thinking about your teenage self, and we can't go back. We can't change anything in the past, right? It is what it is. But you know what we can do is we can learn from those experiences, look at who we are now and move forward because you definitely brought a good sense of hope for not only yourself, for me, and for anybody else out there that's listening to know that look at all these things that Marie's been through and look at where you are now. You're an advocate to help people heal themselves. And what more could you ask for?
Yeah. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun and yeah, wow. I am a crier. I cry all the
That's
time,
all
but
right. I love it.
I didn't realize that question. I've done a lot of inner child work and just finding the love for who I used to be and letting them know that they're okay. And so when you talk about going back into that, it's such a soft spot in my heart because I've been able to go back a lot of times and say those kind of things to myself and I'm
Yeah.
still working on believing them. You know what I mean?
It's a healing process. It doesn't happen overnight, right? We didn't get these experiences or these, different situations that happened to us. They didn't happen in a second, right? They generally
Yeah.
took time to build up. And if we're the people that push everything down all the time, obviously it's going to take a while for us to get rid of all of that. But, we're working on it. And I love the fact that you're coming out here and sharing and saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect either. And we've got ways to go, but we're working on it." And there is a way
Yes.
to work on it, and we can get there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
Awesome.
you having me here. Like I
Yeah.
this has been a lot of fun and I love that you just ask all these questions and keep it going and it's kind of
Yeah,
fun.
well,
Yeah.
I just try and like the whole premise of the podcast, right, is I'm just a normal everyday guy, just like anybody else. Hey, as we talked before, right, I just got laid off from a job. How many people out there are getting laid off, right? I still want to do the show though because these are powerful conversations that we have. They're going to help people. There's jobs out there that I can get. I know I can. I'm not terribly worried about it. Of course I am worried about it. Who isn't? But to have someone on and just inspire me like you did to not only to search more for myself and to start that healing process a little bit more for myself, but to help other people start that healing process. It's amazing. And, before we go, I do want to ask Marie, what's up next for you? I know you talked about, another book in the works and you're doing the podcast. So let the listeners know what's coming up and how they can get a hold of you.
So my book has not been actually like it's not selling online until I get my website done. So what's coming up next is getting my website, building a brand for this community. Once I get that set up, then I will start selling my book online. However, if you are interested, I can give you a link. So it's sliderbabe.com/linktree.
Okay.
Okay. And so if you go there, it's got access to all of my social media sites, and it's got a link to put your email in for the book launch. So if you are
Awesome.
interested, please do that. It also has a link to my normal podcast that I've been doing, which is the Every Day's a Saturday USMC veteran. So I've got this community coming up. I'm working on many different books. I've got three children's books that I've already, two
Good.
of them that I've written, one that I'm in the middle of writing, and I've got two people working on illustrating. I have another book of poetry that I'm working on. And I just found my teenage years portfolio with a bunch of short stories, science fiction, short
Nice.
stories, and poetry that I'm going to type up and publish as well. And I've got a couple other, I've got some other sci-fi. I've written sci-fi in the past, sci-fi fantasy type
Oh,
things, mostly
nice.
fantasy, I should say.
Yeah, that always helps.
So,
You know what, though? I love when people write sci-fi and fantasy and stuff because it helps
yeah,
you escape, right? Get a little
yes.
bit of a momentary escape from the normal everyday life.
Yes. So I've got some short stories on that. I also am writing a bunch of essays, which I might do as blogs for the community, or I might do a book of essays and it's just talking about some of the spiritual stuff or political stuff or other things of just thoughts by Marie. It's like it's going to be I'm probably going to name it something like The World According to Marie.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just my experiences, and so
Yeah.
I'm hoping to do more blogs and stuff like that, so
Yeah,
just a
and this
lot moving forward.
yeah, that's great. And just so you know, and the listeners know as well, they'll probably know this, but you'll have a guest page on justadudepodcast.com. So any information that I get from you, a photo will be there. All your links will be there as well. So if they go to justadudepodcast.com, they'll be able to find you that way as well. But,
Awesome.
I want to just kind of recap because you've been through hell and back, definitely. And now you're out here helping other people find their way. But what's one piece of advice that you'd give someone who's struggling, whether it's, addiction, PTSD, or just life kicking them in the teeth? What's one piece of advice that you'd give someone?
Reach out. Reach out consistently, be loud, be obnoxious about your healing and about asking for help. The right people, the people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind don't matter. So if you feel like you don't have people that you can be loud with your recovery about, get the fuck away from them. Excuse my language.
No,
Get away
that's all
from
right.
them
Yeah.
and get yourself around people who matter, who care about you. Reach out to 988 hotline is open all the time, and that's for people in crisis. You don't have to be suicidal, but if it's like, "Hey, I'm going to drink or I'm going to kill myself," or, whatever it is, or get help, that's who you call. Call the 988 hotline. If you feel like you are in danger, call 911. You know, if you have an addiction, find the recovery group that you support. Join like meetups or get on Facebook, recovery groups. Or if you're a veteran, reach out to the VA. If you just need someone to give you resources, reach out to Nathan or me.
Yep.
Whoever
Exactly.
it is, whatever it is, reach out. Be loud about your healing, because otherwise the alternative is suffering in silence and silencing yourself. And the reality is most of the time we don't have somebody else pushing us under. We are pushing ourselves under. So recognize that the lies that we tell ourselves are bullshit.
Yep.
It is bullshit. It is a
Our
lie.
worst
So
enemy
you
is ourselves, right?
Yes. And so there's another poem that, if you go to my website, you can see it. It's called the Power of Thoughts. Like, recognize that your thoughts, your brain is lying to you. And so just reach out, be loud, be proud of your recovery, um, just get help. Do not try to do this on your own. And if the minute you think you got it, that you think you can do it on your own, reach out even harder,
Yes,
because that is ego trying to pull you down. So just
absolutely.
reach out.
Yeah, that's powerful, Marie. Thanks for that. Thanks for being so real with us today and sharing your experiences and, with the Just a Dude podcast audience, because I know we got folks out there that struggle with, whether it be mental illness, PTSD, addiction, whatever. You're not alone. Reach out for help, ask for help. There's people like myself, Marie out here, but there's even so many more people that can help you as well. So don't, exactly like Marie said, heal out loud. Let your voice be heard. ask for help. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. But Marie, again, thank you for joining me today. This has been absolutely amazing to hear your life story and where you've taken it and to actually have you share your poetry with us. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm so glad you did because it was amazing. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it, and I'll be back anytime you want me to.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Just a Dude podcast. A huge thanks to Marie for joining me today and sharing her incredibly vulnerable story. From foster care to the Army, addiction to sobriety, and now using her voice to inspire others. Go check out her poetry and keep an eye out for that book dropping soon. You won't want to miss it. If you like this episode, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review and tell a friend. We're here every Monday with new guests bringing you more real talk with real people. Until next time, this is Nathan, just a dude signing off. Keep fighting the good fight, folks, and we'll see you on the next episode.